Thank you, Daniel. I'm here in lieu of Melissa Parker, who was ill and could not be here today. She sends her regrets. But with that, I'm going to show her slides showcasing in hopefully 5 minutes, 30 years worth of restoration efforts for the state fish of Texas, which is this feisty fellow here, this charismatic species that is both a species of conservation need and a sport fish. So the Guadalupe bass inhabits the crystal clear, spring-fed stream systems that emanate from the Edwards Plateau. It also is really representative and enigmatic species that is, it's a keystone species, which means that it is only present when there's the right habitat conditions and apex predator conditions for it to be present. So it represents clear, flowing systems of the Edwards Plateau when we all think about what an Edwards Plateau stream looks like. But it's also a prized sport fish, bringing by one study $71 million over a 16-month period to the hill country by anglers specifically targeting Guadalupe bass. So there are a number of habitat challenges for this species, and one being hybridization with non-native smallmouth bass species, which were stocked between the 1930s and 80s by anybody? Texas Parks and Wildlife. So we're doing our best to mitigate the impacts of that introduction, but it hybridizes very readily with those species, which then also outcompete pure Guadalupe bass. Another habitat challenge is habitat degradation from degraded riparian zones and in-stream habitat conditions, but also flow alterations from diminished groundwater supplies. So in many ways, while it's enigmatic of pure flowing streams in the hill country, it's also emblematic of some of the challenges facing the hill country through increased development. So these are some of the strategies that we've used over the past 30 years, a watershed-based approach, so trying to influence landowners to implement from the top down land management practices that benefit in-stream and riparian habitats. We do that by partnering with other agencies such as Hill Country Alliance to capacity build, but also by some of these strategies here, combating riparian invasive species, helping to manage those, such as Arundodonax through the Healthy Creeks Initiative, and also through several outreach education type workshops, engagement, as David Bugg said earlier, trying to get landowners to implement some of those strategies to benefit these species. Just very quickly, I'll go through 3 watersheds where we've taken different approaches towards restoring habitat for these species. The Llano watershed was one of the first that we engaged with using the strategy of genetic swamping, which is stocking over 700,000 pure Guadalupe bass that were raised on our hatchery system to try and reduce the amount of hybridization in that system. It was around 7 to 8%, and now it's down to about 1% of hybridization. So 99% of the bass in that system are now pure Guadalupe bass. And then in addition, providing technical guidance to landowners and conserving riparian habitats in stream corridors. A different approach was taken on the Blanco River, which experienced extreme drought, but smallmouth bass had completely outcompeted and extirpated Guadalupes in that system, so they were not present. But the drought enabled us to go electroshock and seine the remaining smallmouth bass in the upper portion of that system, and then when the rains and flows returned, reintroduce smallmouth bass. So we now have a self-sustaining, naturally reproducing population of Guadalupe bass in the Blanco River. So an incredible conservation success story. And then some of these other bullets here represent the efforts that we undertook in the post-flood to get riparian restoration going in that area. Pedernales is an interesting one. It's more on the preservation of that species because there are no detectable smallmouth bass. So we really take some of those other approaches to try and work towards mitigating the impacts of development and working with landowners to have conservation easements, workshops, and align them with strategies that help implement best management practices. So these are just a list of some of the outcomes. I'll let you read over them instead of going over them. But the one I want to point to right here is this one kind of in the middle that says 25 public fishing areas for Guadalupe bass, because we are a dual mission agency. So while we're tasked with conservation of this species, we're also tasked with providing recreational opportunities, because we need to connect our constituents and our diverse our diverse constituent base with the resource. The Senegalese conservationist forester Baba Douim said that we will only conserve what we love, we'll only love what we understand, and we will only understand what we're taught, and we're best taught by what we experience. So connecting people with that resource is the best way to continue conserving that species into the future. Thank you for your time.